Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to have to read their preliminary words for our session online. Members who are joining remotely must be visible on screen for the purpose of identity verification, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Those members who must continue to use the software's platform's video function while in attendance, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member experiences technical difficulties, they should contact the committee staff for assistance. Video of members' participation will be broadcast in the room and via the television internet feeds. Members participating remotely must seek recognition verbally, and they are asked to mute their microphones when they are not speaking. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep the software platform's video function on the entire time they attend the proceeding. Members may leave and rejoin the proceeding. If members depart for a short while for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or to depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin if they return. Members may use the software platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues only. Finally, I have designated a committee staff member to, if necessary, mute unrecognized members' microphones to cancel any inadvertent background noise that may disrupt the proceeding. Whew. All right. Keep it. Good afternoon. I call to order this hearing on the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee, a review of the fiscal year 2023 budget requests for U.S. Special Operations Forces and Command. Special Operations Forces are at an inflection point. The 2022 National Defense Strategy focuses the U.S. military's capabilities on strategic competition toward countering China's growing multi-domain challenges and Russia's persistent threats, which have only been further magnified by its unconscionable invasion and the ongoing war in Ukraine. U.S. Special Operations Forces have a significant role in countering competitors and adversaries, as well as deterring strategic attacks against the United States. We continue to live in an extremely dangerous and volatile world, and Special Operations Forces should be prioritized as a capability to counter these dangers through its counter-violent extremist organizations mission and other non-kinetic authorities. Today's hearing is focused on the FY23 budget request for Special Operations Command and Special Operations Forces. The budget request highlights SOCOM's support to the National Defense Strategy, which creates a strategic, asymmetric advantage for the nation by bolstering the integrated deterrence capabilities and enhancing campaigning activities and building enduring advantages through innovation and modernization. I would like to hear from our witnesses how the staff community is postured to accomplish this. I would also like to understand how 1202 authorities in SOCOM's Military Information Support Operations, MISO, can support our defense strategy and counter threats from China and Russia. With that, let me introduce today's witnesses. The Honorable Christopher P. Mayer, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, and General Richard Clark, Commander, U.S. Special Operations Command. This will be General Clark's last posture hearing before this committee as the commander of SOCOM. We appreciate your service to this nation and all you've done for the Special Operations Forces. In the interest of time, I ask the witnesses to keep their opening remarks brief so they will have more time for the closed session. With that, let me again thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. I now recognize Mr. Franklin in Ranking Member Kelly's place for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Kelly is here this afternoon briefly. He's going to have to leave, and so he's asked that I would cover for him, and I appreciate that opportunity. And in light of that, I would like to request unanimous consent to submit Ranking Member Kelly's opening comments for the record.
No objections.
Right. And I thank our witnesses for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it late in the afternoon that you take the time to be here with us to talk about this fiscal year 23 budget request for Special Operations Command. I commend the critical investments contained within this request, especially in the undersea capabilities and the continued procurement of armed overwatch. I am, however, as we've discussed offline before, deeply concerned with the top-line budget amount. The FY23 request is $13.2 billion. It's a lot of money, but it's the exact same amount as the last year, And when you take the record inflation into account, this represents a cut in real dollars. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the risks associated with these cuts. Also, I'd like to express express support also for SOCOM's 1202 authority. It's critically important that we codify this authority in U.S. code and increase the funding level to allow for appropriate growth. I look forward to working with all my HASC colleagues this year to make this a reality. Additionally, I stand with Ranking Member Rogers in support for increasing our force posture along NATO's eastern flank, especially with our SOF formation. It is critically important for us to support our eastern NATO allies like the Baltics, Poland, and Romania. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Franklin. We'll now hear from our witnesses and then move into question and answer session. Immediately following questions, we will reconvene for the classified session, which will take place in Rayburn 2212. And I now recognize the Honorable ASD Mayor.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and Congressman Franklin filling in for Ranking Member, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the global posture of our nation's special operations enterprise. I'm honored to testify alongside General Clark, one of our country's most dedicated military professionals. On a personal note, I would like to thank General Clark for his leadership and a very important partnership during his tenure as the SOCOM commander during a time of major transformation and strategic importance. I also appreciate the leadership of Command Chief Master Sergeant Greg Smith, who is here today, who models the senior enlisted leadership that is so critical to the success of our special operators. The dedication, service, and sacrifice of our SOF leaders and the SOF community motivates me each and every day to ensure we are doing all we can to provide them the ways and means to win, regardless of the challenge. I would also like to thank Congress, and particularly this ISO subcommittee, for its steadfast support for our SOF warriors and their families. Ever since the establishment of U.S. SOCOM, our strong partnership with Congress has been instrumental to fielding the world's most capable and elite special operations force. We continue to make progress in advancing Congress's intent to institutionalize the role of the office I lead, Special Operations in Low Intensity Conflict, or SOLIC, within the Department of Defense. Sustaining and enhancing the competitive advantage of the U.S. military depends on our effectiveness in providing civilian oversight and backing of the SOF enterprise. This group of extraordinary military, civilian, and contractors has proven itself to be essential to the U.S. military and our strategic success. In today's increasingly complex security environment, the SOF enterprise provides our nation's leaders with agile, scalable, and discrete options to address challenges across the spectrum of competition, crisis, and conflict. SOF play an essential role in the national defense strategy by holding adversary systems at risk and by enhancing our allies' and partners' ability to resist aggression and malign influence. Even as we transition the SOF enterprise to achieve enduring advantage through integrated deterrence and active campaigning in the gray zone, we continue to enhance our capabilities to conduct high-priority counterterrorism and crisis response operation. The President's FY23 budget request for SOF reflects these priorities in modernizing our maritime capabilities and investing in artificial intelligence and other key technologies. The budget also supports the Armed Overwatch program to ensure our SOF have the required support in remote and austere environments where they operate. As reflected in the FY23 budget, we continue to invest in the well-being of our SOF warriors and their families. Our flagship Preservation of the Force and Families program, or POTF, complements service-administered programs to address the unique physical, cognitive, psychological, and spiritual performance needs of our SOF community. Our ability to draw upon a diverse set of talents and perspectives is essential in our success in a changing operational environment and to SOF's unique ability to engage and collaborate with allies and partners around the world. This week, General Clark and I issued the U.S. SOCOM Diversity and Inclusion Implementation Action Plan, which incorporates key initiatives to optimize our service diversity outreach programs, recruiting opportunities, and identifying barriers to accession for our teammates. Women continue to make major impact within the SOF community, and in the past 2 years, the first 3 women successfully completed Special Forces qualification, and last year, the first woman qualified as a Naval Special Warfare Combatant Crew Member, or SWCC. We are proud of these warriors' individual achievements and continue to actively promote a career in SOF for all who meet our rigorous standards. Lastly, I would like to briefly mention the ongoing war in Ukraine. Among many observations, it serves as a daily reminder of the importance of building the capabilities and resilience of our allies and partners. As we watch the Ukrainians employ a number of elements of irregular warfare against a larger force to great effect, we should internalize the need to continue to grow our own irregular warfare skills and continue to develop and refine irregular warfare options for our nation's leaders. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And now we have General Clark.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and Mr. Franklin representing, thanks. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm honored to testify next to the Honorable Mayor with me today. Joining also is Chief Greg Smith, U.S. SOCOM Senior Enlisted Leader. This is Greg's final time appearing before this committee before he retires after 33 years in uniform. Most importantly, he is representative of the 75,000 men and women of this command, and I am extremely grateful each and every day for his wise counsel. Your Special Operations Forces create strategic, asymmetric advantages for the nation across the spectrum of conflict. U.S. SOCOM bolsters deterrence through our campaigning activities daily. We are innovating and modernizing to build enduring advantage while strengthening our force and family. Amid continual changes to the rules-based international order, maintaining a range of credible options underpins our nation's strategic advantage. We have witnessed Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, China's coercive and malign activities in the Indo-Pacific, and efforts by other states and non-state actors, including violent extremists, to sow instability. In this dynamic environment, SOCOM's enduring value resides in our ability to combat those asymmetric threats, particularly in the gray zone and below the threshold of conflict. We employ precision and surprise to prevail in conflict and respond in crisis, and our formations support the resilience and resistance efforts of our allies and partners, often through sustained long-term partnerships with their special operations forces. Regardless of the threats we face, SOCOM represents a critical strategic head to respond in crisis. Exquisite, tailored capabilities enable us to undertake sensitive and high-risk missions, crucial to safeguarding our citizens and protecting our nation's vital interest. A cornerstone of these efforts remains in our long-standing partnership with ASD SOLIC. The oversight, policy guidance, and advocacy within the Department of Defense provided by ASD SOLIC are essential for the modernization, readiness, and well-being of our Special Operations Forces and their families. Together, we are committed to sustaining trust by strengthening our culture of accountability. We are preparing for future threats by unlocking our nation's diverse talent, and we are leading with our values through our continued efforts to mitigate civilian harm. As we speak here today, more than 5,000 men and women from SOCOM are defending our nation and standing shoulder to shoulder with partners in over 80 countries worldwide. The courage and commitment of over 75,000 members of our Special Operations community are inspiring. As this may be my final opportunity to appear before this subcommittee, I would emphasize it has been the honor of my lifetime to serve with these men and women every day. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Clark, and we'll jump into questions. First question is for as Mayor. Do you believe the 1202 authority is an enduring requirement, and should it be permanent in law?
Chairman, I do believe it's an enduring requirement. I would leave it to the Congress to determine whether it needs to be permanent, but I see no reason why, based on the strategic environment we have and the direction we have from the National Defense Strategy, that an authority that allows irregular warfare and closer cooperation with partners is not going to be essential for decades to come, sir.
Okay, so General Clark.
I do appreciate the advocacy of this committee, for that enduring authority. We can see the benefits of it directly from Ukraine, for where our special operations forces have been working with the Ukrainians, for the last 7 years, and I can greatly see its use in other environments.
Chris, as the mayor, with the Principal Information Operations Advisor on board, do you believe this office will be able to provide oversight on IO operations across the department? And is the Office of ASD SOLIC using this office and its authority to ensure synchronization and coordination of efforts for information operations and MISU?
Chairman, I think to answer your second question first, we are using this office. We're having to build it, so it's not at its full power in terms of both capabilities and people. But the key point of the legislation was to do a posture review and then a strategy. I think that will point the way to what additional requirements are needed across the department. I've had a number of conversations even the last week with Secretary Austin about the need to build our information capabilities across the department, and I think we see that very well manifest, as General Clark already alluded to, in some of our Ukraine irregular warfare needs. And I mean, the Ukrainians are doing an incredible job, and we take small measure in the work we've been able to do with them, and I think that's a good example for what we would see in the future. But to the PIOA, the most important part of that is having an advocate at the direct report level to the secretary. So the undersecretary for policy is that PIOA. We need to continue to build the bench of IO professionals that can help further reinforce and get a degree of irreversible momentum in the department, sir.
And this is a very dangerous question to ever ask, but General Clark, what is your number one funding issue or priority?
No. The majority of our funding is to ensure that we are conducting the proper operations that we need to do forward. And that covers a wide swath, but it is really to make sure that the operations and maintenance funds that allow our special operators to deploy to protect this nation are the most important thing that we need to fund.
I got off scot-easy on that one. Oh, actually, yes. And that, I hand this over to the ranking member, standing in for the ranking member, Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Clark, as we've discussed, the $13.2 million budget makes essentially flat for 3 years, which in light of inflation does represent a cut. As we had talked about for the first time in the organization's history, you're going to be looking at personnel cuts. What would you not be able to accomplish with this budget that is high on your unfunded requirements list?
Congressman, the aspect with this budget is that just we won't be able to go as fast as we would like to in some of our modernization and some of our future capability development. And so as you hit it on what we did was submit an unfunded requirements list, and that list points to some of those specific things that we would like to accelerate if that additional funding was given. We submitted 28 different requirements for about $650 million for SOCOM, which is about 6% of our budget.
Very good. I am supportive of increasing our force posture in Eastern Europe, specifically Baltics, Poland, and Romania, and especially with our SOF personnel. Do you see value in increasing SOF's presence along NATO's eastern flank?
I think it's not as much as the increase in people as it is the capability to make sure that we have the right capabilities in the right places. As you well know, we have been in the Baltics, and we've remained a partner of choice, I believe, with our SOF partners in Eastern Europe for a while. I'd have to reevaluate with General Walters and our Special Operations Command Europe for specific additional, but for the current Ukraine crisis, we put additional people and capabilities forward to assist with that crisis.
And that's an investment that's been going on for some time. As we've talked about, and has been noted in the press, the Ukrainians have put up much stronger fight than a lot of people are going to give them credit for, and I think a lot of that credit goes back to the partnerships that have been formed over these years. I don't know if this is the forum we want to talk about that, or if there's anything in the unclass setting. Could you elaborate a little bit on the benefit that we've seen from those partnerships?
Congressman, in this setting, those enduring partnerships that we've had with the Ukrainian forces in the Ukraine since they were invaded by Russia in 2014 have been critical. They've been enduring. And it's not just the U.S. and the Ukrainian, but we've also brought in many of our NATO allies have also been shoulder to shoulder with us in the Ukraine, training side by side with the Ukrainian partners. So it's the relationships that we have built with many of our NATO allies that have really helped tie this together.
Well, and I'm reminded of the old train like you fight, fight like you train. The time to figure it out is not when the war's hot.
That's exactly right.
The fiscal year 23 budget requests cuts funding for maritime support vessels, namely the Carolyn Schust for you all. Does this requirement does the requirement still exist? And if so, what is SOCOM unable to do without this capability?
Congressman, we're working very closely with INDOPACOM, specifically for the maritime support vessel that you were talking about. That vessel, just like any afloat staging base, and as a former Navy officer, you understand how important proximity is in locations. But the maritime support vessel in and of itself is not a SOF specific requirement or SOF specific funding issue. We're really looking to the services, in this case the Navy and INDOPACOM, to provide that capability that will allow us better proximity to some of the issues in the Indo-Pacific, so that we can be placed in the right positions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you. Representative Sherrill.
Thank you. And General Clark and Command Chief Master Sergeant Smith. And yes, I did have to read off the Air Force enlisted designation. I just want to take a minute to thank both of you. Few people in our military have seen more combat than the two of you. You have spent a lifetime serving this country in some very difficult circumstances. I don't think I can overstate the debt of gratitude our nation owes to both of you. And so I'm very sorry to see both of you leave, but well deserved. So thank you so much for your service. On a bit of a lighter note, I also would like to take just a minute to recognize a great member of the class of 1994, Colonel Brooks, who was just picked up for general. You've made our class incredibly proud, and thank you for your service as well to our nation. General Clark, I believe that irregular warfare and information operations are extremely important to the modern joint force. The unconventional operations underway in the European and Indo-Pacific theaters are a testament to their importance. Do you think that the President's budget provides adequate funding for the continued success of and expansion of the unconventional warfare program?
Congressman, we have sufficient budget to execute those programs in this budget. However, what I would, as we look at some of the specific, as you talk about information operations programs, I think with additional funding, we could speed up the modernization and the capabilities for our forces and apply additional technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And as you have visited, I believe, our joint MISO Web Ops Center and see how we pull that all together, additional funding towards the information operations programs, which is in our unfunded requirements list, I think will make us better, and it will provide additional capabilities.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, the FY23 budget highlights provided by SOCOM list $13.6 million for soft tactical vehicles, and more specifically, quote, the development and testing of joint light tactical ECPs and integration and testing of diesel hybrid electric capabilities. Could you talk a bit more about these efforts to incorporate hybrid electric diesel motors into the soft tactical vehicle family? And are such efforts being employed across the spectrum of the SOF mission portfolio? Is the command exploring electrification and hybrid options for platforms used in special reconnaissance, foreign internal defense, and counterterrorism missions?
Congresswoman, this is actually a department-wide initiative to look at various different ways to make our capabilities more survivable and more sustainable over time. And we view this, I think, not only at the department level, but at the special operations level as an operational imperative. It's entirely possible that there will be circumstances in which having alternative fuel vehicles will be necessary. And I think we've all seen the effects objectively of global warming, and so climate change becomes a driver as we look for a sustainable force over decades to come, ma'am.
And then the Armament Center at Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey, plays a significant role in modernizing the U.S. Special Operations Forces ammunition and equipment to meet the needs of the warfighter. Through the efforts like fielding and sustaining the 105 millimeter and 30 millimeter ammunition for AC-130 gunship fleets, and through projects such as the next-gen IR seeker decoy and multi-mission small unmanned aerial systems, the Armament Center's importance cannot be overstated. As the SOF community continues to modernize against global strategic competition, will Special Operations Forces look to the Armament Center for ammunition and equipment modernization? What sort of projects or initiatives are underway, or that are underway at Picatinny would SOCOM like to see supported in the future? And I don't know, General Clark, if you have any thoughts as well.
The partnership with all the armament centers and what we do with the services, it really helps. We take projects. And Picatinny in specifically has helped us with some of our light machine guns and with some of our medium-level machine guns and sniper weapons. And they do a tremendous job. And it really helps leverage a soft requirement. And then sometimes the other services will pick up those requirements and see the value of a certain weapon system, and then they can scale it. So we really appreciate what Picatinny in particular, but other armament and military systems do for us.
Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Sherrill. We now have Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for being here. A couple of my questions have already been answered. The persistent engagement with partners like the Ukraine, the 1202 authority that the chairman asked about. I think we share the desire to make that permanent. Quick question on that, the definition irregular with regard to irregular warfare. If there are adjustments that need to be made in that definition, I think it would be helpful if you could share that with us, whether this setting or another setting, or if the definitions are good, then we simply move ahead with what we have. Secretary, are the definitions what you need?
Congressman, I think the definitions are sound enough. The one point we always make when we talk about irregular warfare is that while SOF may be the lead or the preponderance of the core on this, we need the rest of the joint force to be effective in that space. But 1202, and as I think your question poses, the definition of irregular warfare there, I think we're comfortable with it, and it's proven to be effective, sir.
Okay. General, my understanding is that if something is not changed, that you could see a reduction of as many as 400 personnel. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressman. There's a soft directed cut of slightly over 400 for FY23.
Okay, and that cut is in an appropriation language from the past year. Is that correct? Do you know?
It's in the
Secretary,
President's budget.
I apologize. Secretary, do you know where that?
Yeah, Congressman, it's part of the President's budget. It requires a cut of about 440, and most, if not all of that, is in unfilled billets or headquarters at this point.
Okay. All right, we'll look for that language, and I think most of the people on the committee will probably look to remedy that as best as possible. If we're looking about expanding the operations of irregular warfare, it seems to me that we need to be very careful about how many personnel we would reduce. I have one thing that I have tried to focus on is SOCOM, and it bothers me, General and Secretary, that we lose so many Americans to the illegal drug overdoses, the majority of which comes from Central and South America. And it seems to me that Southern Command kind of gets the leftovers, if you will, and yet more Americans die because of what happens in that part of the Western Hemisphere than have ever died because of terrorism. The budget request that you have, do you have the resources that you need to dismantle the illegal drug networks operated by the international cartels in Central and South America?
Congressman, that specific mission for the department has not been given to U.S. SOCOM.
Okay.
We do employ forces within underneath Southcom, where there is clearly where we're assisting certain countries in the Southcom area of operations to assist them with some of the terrorists and some of the threats to their countries. There is clearly a nexus between criminal organizations and terrorist organizations. So I think by extension, some of that is impacted. But the funding that you talk about of being sufficient isn't necessarily a SOCOM aspect. But I think Mr. Mayor would have a comment further on that.
I would say, Congressman, too, the broader DoD mission is principally to support law enforcement in these spaces, and the DoD mission is really monitoring and helping with interdiction. Generally, where we see shortfalls at times is the lack of law enforcement capability to act on even some of the tipping and queuing we're able to do for law enforcement. So I think it's a complicated problem, sir, that probably deserves more explanation than we have time here to provide.
I think at one point we were letting more than 90% of the shipments go that we actually had actionable intel on. And I think that's something that we as the United States need to do a better job with. But I appreciate all of you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Clark and Chief Smith, I'm sad to see you two joining me in the great retirement, but I do want to associate myself to what Ms. Cheryl said, and thank you both for your incredible service to this country. And just note that it's just been a real pleasure working with you both, and I know that you'll run through the tape just as I plan to do, and I hope we can continue to work on some of these initiatives. And to that point, I mentioned this to you yesterday, and we've heard a bit of conversation today about 1202. I'm working with Congresswoman Stefanik to make it permanent, as well as to increase the annual funding for the authority to $25 million. And I'll reserve my question about how you would use that additional resources for the secure portion, but move on to ask you that I see that you've requested $14 million to support the Joint Task Force Special Reconnaissance Enabling Command. That's a mouthful. Can you tell me more about this JTF and how is this funding going to be used?
Congresswoman, the Joint Task Force Special Reconnaissance Enabling Command is something that this command stood up as a subordinate command. It's commanded by a one-star, in this case, Army general. It could be a joint, it could be any service going into the future. And it is specifically to look at, for SOCOM, our most sensitive activities that we could be conducting global. And it is to synchronize and enable and deploy the capabilities that exist within SOCOM to be able to take these problems and ensure that they are properly coordinated with the interagency and with the other combatant commanders and with the Department of Defense. In a closed session, I can give you some type of specific things that they would be doing, but as we look at our most vexing problems globally, that SOCOM needs to put attention on, this command enables us to, in fact, tackle those problems.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, what do you see as SOCOM's primary role in an era of great power competition? I know there's been a lot of conversation about how to balance the continued need to focus on counterterrorism missions with the evolving challenges of actors like Russia and China.
Congresswoman, I think that's a critical point. This evolution we're underway is not one of moving wholly away from where we've been, but making what we have been doing sustainable for the nation, counterterrorism and crisis response, while we increasingly support the joint force in what we know is going to be a complicated strategic environment with peer adversaries or near peer adversaries like China and Russia. Specifically, I think some of the attributes that SOF has demonstrated over the last 20 years to great effect still apply here. So the partners and allies have proven to be very, very useful, and I think Ukraine has proven that, and it's indeed a comparative advantage we have vis-a-vis the Chinas and the Russias, and that is something that has been built over lots of years of close interaction. SOF also has placement and access in places the rest of the joint force does not have, and that in some cases unlocks much greater capability that we and our allies can bring. And I think ultimately we talked a little bit earlier about the irregular warfare. Some of that's the inherent problem solving or ability to look at a complicated problem and bring other aspects of the interagency or the Department of Defense together in a way that often isn't baked in the same way in other communities. So I think General Clark would share this view. We've talked about it a lot. The lessons we've learned over the last 20 years and put into practice apply here. We just need to do them differently, in some cases faster, in a more technology-empowered way. So I'm very bullish, and I think we've got the right task. We just need to make sure that we're doing it in the right way, in a thoughtful, balanced way, ma'am.
Great, thank you, and I look forward to hearing the additional specifics on 1202 and the JTF when we go to closed session. Thanks. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Representative Bacon.
Thank you. Appreciate you both being here. I appreciate your leadership. I congratulate both the commander and the command chief for a wonderful career, and you've been wonderful to work with. All my questions are directed more to General Clark. Your ops tempo was high, is high, and will be high. And yet, if I understand right, the budget for SOCOM is flatlined. Is that the case? It's a flatline budget, you're getting zero increase?
That's correct in the requested budget at this point.
Right. And yet we have 8.5% inflation. So that works to about an 8.5% cut to your budget. So you've touched on this a little bit with the previous questions, but what is an 8.5% cut to your budget? How does that affect the future of SOCOM? And what are those impacts?
It really goes to speed and how quickly can we modernize. And so we have to make tough decisions. We have to balance to still conduct the missions that we have going forward and prepare and train. And we're gonna do that within the budget we have. But I think it goes to the speed that we can modernize, and we look at some of our adversaries and how quickly they are modernizing. And that's we may not keep pace with the capabilities that we need to develop.
But by definition, with an 8.5% inflation and a flatline budget, this is a reduction for SOCOM. I just think we got to be clear about that. And the budget overall was a 4% increase for DOD, but domestic non-military spending was 12% increase. So we see the priority of the administration here: non-military domestic spending 12%, military 4%, with inflation at 8.5%. And the budget for DOD overall was inadequate, and I think you're paying even a bigger price on there. So I just wanted to make that clear. Before I go to my next question, I want to congratulate the whole team, though. What you did in Ukraine from 2014 till now, most people do not know about it. You were training Ukrainians how to defend themselves, how to organize. Can you touch on that a little bit, General Clark? Because this is an unheralded part of what America did. I give credit to Ukrainians for fighting hard and putting their hearts and souls into this fight, but we were helping with that training. If you could touch on that, I'd be grateful.
Yes, sir. our special operations forces help develop and work with other allies to come into Ukraine and help build up the Ukrainian special operations forces, where during that time they doubled in size, but I would say they also not just increased their size, but they increased their capabilities over that time. And it was the collective organizations that did that. And I think we also got to give credit to some of the National Guard forces that were also training the Ukrainians at the same time. But I think one aspect is that it was a lot of our civil affairs, our psychological operations, and our special forces that were also working side by side with the Ukrainians. So it wasn't just a combat forces, but it was also other parts of special operations that work very closely with their Ukrainian partners.
Well, I think this is a point of pride for our country, the great work that you did. Your number 2 unfunded requirement is the procurement of counter unmanned aerial vehicles to counter the UAVs. And I think this is critical. We're seeing them all over the world. They're attacking Saudi Arabia, they're attacking us in Iraq. What does it mean for you to have this capability or to not have this capability if we don't get it funded?
Thanks for bringing this one up, because as you just point out, the threat from unmanned aerial systems from our adversaries is already here, and it's growing. And the capabilities that we, as a nation, need to continue to develop for in the combat zones today, where some of our forces are being attacked, to places in the future where they could be used that could even come back into our homeland. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to look very hard as a nation in making sure that we put efforts into this. SOCOM already has a significant investment in this portfolio, but as you note, we have asked for additional funding in our unfunded requirements list to ensure that we're developing the capabilities, and we can, as I said earlier, our unfunded requests, speed them up so that we can make sure that we have the capabilities we need today.
Thank you. I think this is something we can work on as a committee to make happen. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thanks. General Clark, thanks for coming in today. First question's for you, and it's about the recently published Diversity and Inclusion Implementation Plan on March 22. With you and Master Sergeant Smith leaving soon, one concern I would have is the handoff and ensuring that the new uniformed leadership of SOCOM has a strong commitment to its implementation. Can you discuss where this is going to sit in the handoff?
Yes, sir. Well, one, it's co-signed with Mr. Mayor. So is ASD SOLIC providing that oversight and guidance? I have no doubt, because we have talked about it, that he will ensure any future leadership puts this in place. But I think more broadly, this is about culture. And this is about making sure the entire organization is bought in. And as you and I discussed, but for the broader committee, every single commanders conference that we come together as a command, and we do these quarterly with all the commanders in SOCOM. This, along with culture and accountability from our comprehensive review, are at the top of the list, and we talk about how we have to get better. So I believe that it's great that Chief Smith and I are bought into it, but I would also suggest that our subordinate commanders and their commanders and senior enlisted leaders are also bought in to unlocking and making sure that we have the talent of America that wants to come to SOCOM is welcome, and that once they're here, we're inclusive of and we retain them.
Thanks, and ASD Mayor. On that point, the new vision and strategy that you both signed off on does include the strategic plan and stating a desire to increase the diversity of ethnicities, races, beliefs, perspectives, and experiences in our formation to meet the complex challenges facing the nation. Essentially, that honestly, the face of the U.S. is changing, and we need to change with it so that we reflect the U.S., but also take advantage of the opportunities that gives us. Can you talk about your commitment to the implementation of the D&I plan?
Congressman, so echoing General Clark's points, one of the benefits of the structure that Congress has set up here is that in the context of civilian oversight, we have a continued role to ensure that the force and the command stay focused on this. I have no doubt whatsoever that the leadership, because I've joined many of those discussions that General Clark was referencing, is focused on this. I think to get to the specifics of your question, not only do we need to be reflective of the nation that we represent, but there's capabilities and richness in that community that can be applied operationally and strategically, the challenges we have. It's a different fundamental problem set when you're going against terrorists than it is against peer adversaries that have allies and partners around the world. And if we can't do some of the core things I already mentioned in the context of placement and access allies and partners, then some of the imperative that SOF brings is lost. So it's not only is it the right thing to do for the health of the force and some of the things that General Clark already mentioned, there's an operational reason to do that. It just makes us better in taking on the nation's challenges, sir.
Thank you. I want to shift to the Preservation of the Force and Family Program, or POTF. It's another issue we discussed, General, earlier, and I understand that with the budget that's been proposed, there is a potential real cut to POTF and the support for families. Can you discuss that and where that sits in your unfunded priorities requirement?
As we looked at the preservation of the force and family, we look at SOCOM's overall budget, the preservation of the force and family internal would take about an 8% cut to the next year's budget. I did not put in the unfunded requirements because we're really, the focus of that was on modernization and building capabilities. What I think the real cuts could be is it could come to some of our service providers that are out at the tactical formations that we may have to make some tough decisions and potentially reduce a slight amount of services to some of our service members and their families.
Given that, ASD Meyer, then what can you tell us about your commitment to the future of POTF?
POTF is critically important, I think, for our forces. It's, as I said in my opening statement, Congressman, really the standard. I remain very committed to that, including the additional, some of the cognitive care aspects that we think is very important. One of the challenges, though, to be very direct, is POTF is very expensive, and with it, the more that we add additional elements of the soft enterprise, the more expensive it becomes. So it's a challenge, and it's one of the things that I talk regularly to some of the component commanders that are closer to the problem, and they express some of those same challenges of as it's become more attractive and more people are using it, the usership goes up, and therefore it becomes in more demand. So it's something that I think from the force readiness and care of our service members and their families, it's critically important on my list, sir.
Thanks. And maybe in the course of the folks who want an $800 billion defense budget over here, they can throw some peanuts at the POTF budget and top it up. So thanks, appreciate that.
Thank you, Representative Lawson. If there are no further questions, the open session of the hearing is adjourned, and we will reconvene in 2212 for the classified session.